Hi, if you're watching this, you're come here to hear about my experience with chemotherapy. So I will be going through my seventh chemotherapy session. This is the end of my sixth chemotherapy session. I had that uh, 2 week. Well, let's see. Today's Tuesday. I had it last Wednesday. Yeah, you go anyway. I can't remember. it's um, so this one has actually been very mild. I haven't had much problem at all compared to some of the previous one where I'd getting over the cold or so on. So this one, get a little bit of peripheral neuropathy, which you get there. That's almost gone from my hands, and I say almost. I feel it a little bit there. Sensitivity to cold. Well, I'm not really sure about that one. So I get up this morning and I'm going out to go get my blood test taken, and I go, it's cold, it's cold out here. And then I read the temperature is 29 degrees. So, and it actually starts snowing. But I'm going, yeah, it was a little bit colder than I expected. I feel the cold sensitivity, which is that's the thing that surprised me the most. This one has been a little bit unusual in that the biggest problem was I bit my tongue over a week ago, just before I started chemo, and it took a while for that to heal because on there, and with chemotherapy with this 5FU, you can get mouth sores, and I do develop sores like in the back of my mouth. I shine a flashlight in my mouth and I see them. I really don't feel them unless they get a little bit. I've This time I didn't feel them at all, but previously I felt them when I'm brushing my teeth, when that brushes up against them. But I really didn't feel them at all, except it's where I bit my tongue, and that just took a long time, a lot longer to heal than I was expecting. And that's because I have a compromised immune system. I was looking at one of the things I do is I get my complete blood count, and they look through it, and I can see the steady progression. How my white blood cells are going. Yeah, my red blood cells are actually. Last time I was technically anemic. This time I'm technically not. I went from 12.9 to. Oh, I went from previous chemo. I was at 13.0, which is technically not anemic, and then I went to 12.9, and which was technically anemic, and then I'm back up to 13. So I'm now no longer quote anemic, which is where I'd like to be because I feel much better when I have more blood. So this one has been relatively mild. I mean, the cold sensitivity is there. The little bit of peripheral neuropathy. I do get tired, and I admit that. And I get tired, and I'm sleeping more. And I've fallen into, shall we say, a bad habit. It's a habit that I've had, and I don't think it's related to chemo, is I turn into a night owl, and that I'd like to do my work late at night. So sometime I will spend, in fact, I've spent several nights where I go to bed at 4 a.m. And I don't think that's related to chemo, but it's because I'm just my lifestyle that I've spent more and more time during the day. I take a nap in the afternoon, and then I get up late at night and start working, and then I'm actually feel much more. I have been trying to get out and walk, and I haven't been very successful at that. I need to get out and do some more exercise. And I keep saying, well, when it warms up. Well, it was cold this morning, and it's nice. I actually went out, take the garbage out, and it was beautiful blue sky, but the cold winds. The winds were cold, but according to looking up on the wall here, it's 57 degrees outside. Well, that's sort of fake. I don't really believe that because I have where I put the outside temperature gauge. If late in the afternoon the sun shines on it, and it gets a little bit warm. It's not in the shade. I didn't realize that when I put it out there that way. I'll probably I'm moving in a couple of months anyway. Yeah, that's the other thing. I'm planning on moving in by the end of June. I will be into my own new office, which is going to be interesting. Talk more about that when I get closer to that. But this one hasn't been bad at all. I mean, sense of taste is a little bit off. I don't taste certain things like mashed potatoes. I like the texture, but they're sort of bland. Bland foods I have a hard time tasting. Um, Certain things, sweets, I do have this. I think my sweet tooth has been stimulated a bit with this, but it really hasn't been bad. And I read the comment from someone who said her father was just going through this, and I feel sorry for anybody who has to go through this. But for me, if you're don't be don't be afraid of chemo. It's really, at least for me, it hasn't been that bad at all. I just you sit there, you get the hiccups. The only other weird one, the weird side effect that I get, and it's related to the chemo, but it's not the chemo. It's actually related to my port. I have a little bump here, which is the port that was surgically implanted that makes it easier to get chemo because they just stick me here into the port and then it does that. They use heparin because they don't want the port to clog. And I have suddenly noticed that I'm bleeding a bit more. Well, I'm diabetic. So I get up in the morning and I stick my finger with the blood. That's nothing. If you're diabetic, if you're afraid of that, I mean, I stick myself. I'm supposed to stick myself at least 4 times a day. So whatever, I'm supposed to stick myself to test my blood. I take insulin and I take Byetta. Yes, I'm on a bizarre combination of insulin and Byetta. So what happens is that I stick my finger, and this was the first thing I noticed was normally you get a tiny little drop of blood and you test your blood and see how you're doing, and as chemotherapy tends to send your blood glucose through the roof anyway. That's an interesting discussion, but I actually had to increase the amount of insulin because my blood glucose was going way too high, and now hopefully after chemo then that will come down, but stimulated my appetite and I'm eating bad things. And so anyway, but I test my blood and you wipe your finger and then you go on and then you go, oh, I got blood all over my thumb or all over my finger or whatever because it's still bleeding. And so you go, okay, that was the first thing I noticed. Then now it's got to the point when I inject my insulin, which is a very, very fine needle, and you inject your insulin and I count to 16 to get the insulin. You get the insulin, you pull the needle out, and it doesn't bleed immediately, but it starts to bleed in a little bit. The reason I notice that is I look at my shirts, and I was wearing a white t-shirt, and I go, what did I spill on myself? I'm looking down, and I go, I got all these, I hadn't eaten anything, and I go, I don't remember, and I go, oh, that's blood. I'm bleeding, and it's just sort of strange. It's the heparin because I'm bleeding a little bit. So it's not to treat the chemo, but it's to handle the thing. I got to talk to my doctor tomorrow about that I'm bleeding a little bit. Probably not going to do anything. Maybe cut back the heparin. I don't think so, but it's I just have to be careful with that so that I make sure. I've noticed that. So yeah, a little bit of blood every now and again from sticking myself and sticking my fingers, and as things go, that's not that terrible of a thing. You just, terrible. You just have to stick your finger. If you're diabetic, you stick your finger. You got to make, my phrase is you got to make friends with your meter, and my meter is right here. You have to make friends with your meter, and because it's the friend that won't lie to you. You can lie to yourself and say, no, I didn't eat that much. Your friends can lie to you and say, no, you look good. You're it's okay, whatever, and even make excuses for yourself. But your meter will tell you the truth, whether you've overeaten or not. So that's why I said you make friends. It's one of the few things in life that will tell you the truth of how you're doing at diabetes. So that's just a other slight thing that I always tell people: if you're diagnosed with diabetes, make friend of your meter. Yes, your friend will bite you a little bit and cause your finger, but it's a tiny little stick. It doesn't really hurt much. That hurts. That sticking your finger hurts more than injecting the insulin when you have to get to that point. So I'm on a combination of meds with that, but it's, it hasn't been bad. I mean, it's just been an interesting exercise going through this one, and I'm looking forward to doing number 7 tomorrow and see how that goes. Because last one, my sodium levels have still been a little bit low, and I when I go in for chemo, they can put saline into me, but I prefer not to because it doesn't hurt or anything. It just takes time because they'll put a half a liter, or if they put a liter, it's like 30 more minutes sitting in the infusion center, as they call it, where they're there. So I just prefer to come home. I'm more comfortable at home with the bag and so on, which is a pain. There's that one. It's just, that the metallic taste is an irritant, and for me, the spicy foods, salsas, and eat a lot of salsa with things. Put salsa on things because I like the spice. I always like the spicier foods, and with the cancer, it's one of the things I can taste, and it's got a nice strong taste. And Altoids, get yourself things of Altoids. And then, of course, there was the York peppermint patties. I went on a binge of those a while back, and yeah, that is, my oncologist doesn't care if I gain weight. I care if I gain weight. Actually, they're worried that I lose weight. You don't want to lose weight when you're on chemo. And yeah, it's real easy to be bad because that also affects my blood glucose and things like that. So yeah, York peppermint patties in moderation are great because they have the strong peppermint flavor. They're sweet. I can taste those. So you just have to find things. The cinnamon Altoids, I sort of have become addicted to. I have a thing on the shelf by the kitchen, and I have some in the car. And so if the metallic taste gets too strong, I can either eat the Altoids. The peppermint ones are good too. That one. Peppermint Lifesavers, I think I mentioned that before. I stay away from them. I love them. They're great, but they have interesting side effects. Nothing to do that. So yeah, this has been a fairly mild one. I think if you start chemo, by the end of chemo, if you're on the same stuff that I'm on, you may become a pepperhead. It's simply because you like spicy. You'll like things that you can taste. But I've always been a little bit of a pepperhead. So I love to hear your stories. I mean, it's been fun. I'm looking forward to tomorrow. Only thing that they changed the schedule around. I like to go in early in the morning, and they sent me in there later. And I like to get out of there early by 10. If I go in there by 8, if I have my normal 8 a.m. appointment, I get in there at 8 a.m. Then by 9 or so, I'm starting the infusions, and which means it's 2.5 hours. That means I'll get out of there by 11:30. At 10, I'll go in there. It'll be, it's gotta wait for the doctor and talk to the doctor, and they have to ask you a whole bunch of questions. Has anything changed? And they keep asking all the stuff. The other one that you get used to is you go, at least with where I'm at, what's your name and what's your date of birth, because they'll put the little slave band, I guess is the phrase. I took it off, but it's when they access your port, they put the little band that is on your, so you get to wear that for a little while, and then I'm glad to take that off but they always ask you for everything just to make sure that they're giving it the right stuff to the right person. What's your name and what's your date of birth? And it's interesting. But yeah, so this one has been very mild. hardest thing was the when I bit my tongue and it took longer to heal up, um, and then you'd expect. Everybody bites their tongue once in a while, I guess. It just, it's there. And just took a lot longer to heal up. And it was mild. So thank you for watching. I sort of rambled on here about this. Work is real intense for me right now, which is good. I enjoy it. I'm having a lot of fun at work. I have the pleasure and it's the luxury of having a job I love. I love doing what I do, and so what happens is that's great, and so this is that, and I have flexible hours and things like that. So I'm very grateful, and the company I'm working for has been very supportive, and so we're it's going along real well. So thank you for watching.